We all have our personal likes and dislikes. Here are 10 of my favourite places in Thailand. Crowded, noisy, dirty, frenetic, congested, polluted. There is no shortage of adjectives for Bangkok. It's such a city of contrasts. There's old and new, modern and traditional, rich and poor. It's huge, something like 40 times the size of Thailand's second largest city. There's something for everyone, hundreds of magnificent temples and food from all around the world. I've lost track of the number of times I've been to Bangkok, but even now, whenever I arrive it feels exciting. But my tolerance for Bangkok is limited. After about 4 days, my senses are completely overwhelmed and I need to get out. On one trip to Sangkhlaburi, a Thai friend suggested that I visit Sangkhlaburi. It's populated by ethnic Mon people. It's right on the Thai-Burmese border, and it's home to the longest wooden bridge in Thailand. As with all the places I enjoy, there are none of the tacky tourist trappings. You just get an opportunity to see people living the traditional way of life that they've lived probably for centuries. The river is extremely important. It's where the kids play and where people do their laundry and wash their hair. Phatthalung is a very pretty province in southern Thailand that doesn't see a great deal of tourism. There's a big Muslim population, but unlike Yala, Narathiwat, Pattani and even Songkhla, there are very few problems with Muslim insurgency. You can find some great national parks, great beaches and great seafood. For some reason it's not on most tourists' radar, but it really is worth visiting. Just like Phatthalung, Trang isn't as well known to tourists as places like Krabi and Phuket. It's on the Andaman coast, there are some beautiful beaches and it's home to the rare dugong. Trang also has islands which are easily accessible by longtail boat from piers on the mainland. In addition to its beaches, there are some very beautiful forest areas. And here is a place called Gachong Hills where we spent one night in a very luxurious tent. The thing I like about these non-touristy areas is the way the traditional way of life has been preserved. These days there are lots of trendy coffee shops in Thailand, which are comfortable and nice to visit, but I also like to see these old style traditional coffee shops as well. And when you visit these places, you're never quite sure who you're going to meet. Here I am having afternoon tea with ex-Prime Minister of Thailand, Nai Chuan Likpai, who is a native of Trang. I visited 3 historical parks in Thailand, Ayutthaya, Sukhothai and Gampang Phet. Ayutthaya is the most recent, it's the easiest to get to, you can get there quite easily from Bangkok by taxi or train, and in my opinion it's the most impressive. It's been said that the Burmese completely destroyed Ayutthaya in 1767, but there's still a lot left, and there's certainly enough remaining to give you a very good idea of what it must have been like to have lived in one of Thailand's ancient capitals. If you're in Bangkok, I think it's certainly worthwhile doing a half-day or one-day trip to Ayutthaya. At one time, Nakhon Si Thammarat was the most important city in peninsular Thailand, and today is the location of one of the most important temples in southern Thailand. Many Thais go to make merit at Wat Phra Mahathat, and the temple is believed to contain a Buddha tooth relic. Because of the city's importance in the past, it was vulnerable to attack, so there was a city wall, part of which still remains. There's a huge amount of fruit grown in the province, and this is sold cheaply in the fruit market in the main town. There are also mountains, and one place called Kiriwong is supposed to have the best air quality, the best ozone in the whole of Thailand. And if you go to a place called Kanom, there are some great beaches. Once again, it's one of those provinces that not many tourists go to, but there's a lot to see and do. I've put numbers on this list, but there's no real order of preference, and in the future, as I discover more places in Thailand, the list will change. I'm not a great fan of the main tourist resorts in Thailand, such as Pattaya, Phuket, Samui, which is why you won't find any of those places on this list. However, Krabi has somehow managed to remain quite low key and hasn't become over commercialised like those other places. It has some great beaches, islands, mangrove swamps, emerald pools, there's lots of natural beauty, some fantastic hotels, and for some reason there are lots of really good Indian restaurants. It's about a 5-hour drive from where I live, and when we all manage to get some time off, that's a place we normally head to. Phatthalung is probably most famous for the Thailand I Protected Wetlands Reserve, which is very impressive and shouldn't be missed, but there's a lot more to the province than just Thailand I. Southern Thailand is famous for its large limestone karsts, and if you're travelling from the very south of Thailand northwards, Phatthalung province is where you start to see them. In addition, there's lots of beautiful countryside, there are hot springs, and Phatthalung also borders Sangkhlaburi Lake. It really is a lovely province. As you've probably guessed by now, I don't like the tourist areas of Thailand, and Phatthalung is another area that has seen very little westernisation and commercialisation. It's only about 90 minutes from where I live, and it's one of my favourite escapes. It's something of a generalisation, but the places in Thailand that I find the most boring are the beaches and islands, and the places that I find the most interesting are the border towns, especially those places on the Thailand-Burma border. The local economies are driven by supply and demand, and there is constant cross-border traffic. Hundreds of bicycles go across the border to Burma because there's demand for bicycles, and lots of cheap labour comes the other way because cheap labour is required in the many garment factories on the Thai side of the border. In Mae Sot, the border is a river, and the labour force floats across the river on inflated inner tubes. There are lots of NGOs in Mae Sot, lots of Burmese, and refugee camps have been set up to house them. And if you've been living in Thailand for quite a while, it's just fascinating to go somewhere and see a completely different culture. I much prefer mountains and rice fields to beaches and islands. Consequently, I had a fantastic time when I visited Chiang Rai in 2006. I hired a tour guide for the day. He was from one of the northern Thai hill tribes, and he showed me some great places in his little 4x4 car. The Golden Triangle area was particularly enjoyable. I took a boat ride and saw lots of really beautiful areas of northern Thailand. Chiang Rai is another Thai province that has a border with Burma, and these places are always fascinating, observing the Burmese kids jumping over the fences and all the other cross-border activity. Chiang Rai has many traditional temples, and it's also the home to the famous White Temple, Wat Rongkhun, that was designed by Ajahn Chalermchai, and it was the same man that painted the murals on the Thai Buddhist temple in Wimbledon, London. One quite unfortunate aspect of Chiang Rai is the hill tribe tourist centres that have been set up. They lead a very different lifestyle compared to most other people in Thailand, and that should be respected. However, they've just become a tourist attraction. These hill tribe tourist attractions have been set up, and whenever tourists arrive, they just get up and dance and sing like performing seals. It's actually quite sad to see. In the past, hill tribe treks were popular, where people would trek for a couple of days to visit them in their villages. Nowadays, it's just like going to SeaWorld and watching performing seals and dolphins. It's really undignified, and I found the whole thing quite embarrassing. I hope you enjoyed that little presentation, As I said at the start, don't take it too seriously, it's just my own personal subjective opinion. Please leave any questions, comments or other feedback below. There'll be more videos soon, and thank you for watching.